We will call this our special President's Day edition of USC Trojans Wire. USC Trojans Live. USC Trojans Wire, of course, is integral as well because that's where we can find Matt Zemek every day. So get on over to Trojans Wire. Join Matt Zemek there. Here is our show that we provide for you each and every week, USC Trojans Live on a Monday night. Matt, how you doing tonight?
Doing well, Mark. USC Trojans Wire live, I guess you could put it both
Live
ways.
Wire?
Live
Yes.
Wire. Yeah, that's what a lot of Big Ten fans think I am. So,
well, I'm sure. Well, it's already started apparently, but your entry into covering the Big Ten should be quite the spectacle. I'll be entertained by that.
oh yeah, it's going to be loads of fun.
Well, I reminded Big Ten fans in a video that I produced last week that sure, Ohio State and Michigan should not be intimidated by anyone, but I don't know if I made this comment to you when we were tossing this around in the last several weeks, but I do believe that while it can be argued that Ohio State has had the most consistent, even beyond Alabama, the most consistent elite program, if you go back to, pick your time frame pre-Saban, whether that's post 1970, post 1990, whatever time frame, they're going to have the best winning percentage and stayed elite and have just rarely been down, if at all, it could be argued. However, those USC peaks of all-time great teams supersede even the best of Ohio State teams. I don't think that's really arguable.
Oh, I mean, when you had Woody Hayes and John McKay meeting on the mountaintop, McKay and the Trojans usually, not always, there was the 74 Rose Bowl and there was the 69 Rose Bowl as well. But, most of the time, USC had the upper hand in those matchups. So, yeah, I mean, with Pete Carroll as well, when Pete Carroll had that whole thing rocking and rolling, Ohio State goes into the Coliseum and gets its doors blown off. In the late 2010s. So, yeah, I mean, that point stands. But like Ohio State has been, remarkably consistent. And, this is the school that, Woody Hayes, I think, is the coach that comes to mind first for anyone who thinks about, Ohio State as a dynastic, enduring power. But you had Paul Brown there before Woody Hayes. And I mean, Paul Brown, arguably the greatest innovator in the history of football, period. And he was at Ohio State before Woody was. So like that just kind of speaks for itself. And I mean, Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel, greats in their own right on their own terms, removed from any context. But you have Woody and you have Paul Brown. It's an extraordinary legacy that you have at Ohio State over, 90 years.
And Jim Tressel, yes, kind of seems like he has been forgotten to a certain extent among great coaches. And he's really the guy that got Ohio State back to the zenith.
After the wilderness years and after John Cooper losing to Lloyd Carr in Michigan. Yeah. So to me,
yes,
Tressel has a significant place in Ohio State's history.
Back to getting to BCS bowl games every year, being a top five team every year, just repeatedly.
Yes, and absolutely. You have to put for instance, just I mean, I know this is a USC show, but like we're talking about the Big Ten where USC is going to be. Like you have to put Tressel ahead of Earl Bruce, and I mean Earl Bruce wasn't bad. Had the great '79 team that almost won the national title. USC beat that team by 1 point in the 1980 Rose Bowl. We talked about Charles White after his death. That was Charles White's greatest game as a USC Trojan. Earl Bruce certainly had his moments. But you have to put Tressel ahead of Earl Bruce because of a national championship, because of the restoration. So, like Jim Tressel, like no one should overlook or underrate his contributions at Ohio State.
Yeah, he pretty much lived in the top five for a decade for the most part. Earl Bruce actually had the best record in the Big Ten, besting Bo Schembechler during his 9-year career there, but just not quite there. And to circle this back to USC, apologies going out to our Trojan fans there. I will bring it back to USC because the pinnacles are easy to point out. McKay, Carroll, but considering our age group and the not just the players that we first got attached to at the collegiate level, but then seeing them become pros, those John Robinson
Yes.
teams. Oh my goodness, the
Yeah.
talent. And now that I can look back upon it, that great Rose Bowl game of 1980, and of course we honored Charles White several weeks ago upon his passing, and the 237 yards rushing, I believe, is the number, and the great 83-yard drive to beat a really tremendous Ohio State team that was undefeated. But to look back on it now, for as good as Ohio State was, and they produced tons of pros off that team, that USC team was, they, for as good as Ohio State was, and they had NFL players all over the place, I wouldn't have been surprised if USC would have won that game by 4 or 5 touchdowns. Like they had like Hall of Famers on both sides of the ball.
That's right. I mean, those late 1970s John Robinson teams, I mean, the names just roll right off the tongue, right? Ronnie Lott, Anthony Munoz, Marcus Allen, on and on and on and on. And, just had the fast train to NFL superstardom. Ronnie Lott goes to the 49ers and they instantly take off, instantly make the Super Bowl, instantly have a dynasty. Marcus Allen, kept the Raiders great. From the John Madden years in the mid to late 70s, so under Tom Flores, Marcus Allen just kept the Raiders at that very high standard. And of course, Marcus Allen, he didn't have to leave the Coliseum. He because the Raiders went from Oakland to Los Angeles in 1982. Allen's Heisman season, his final season at USC was 81. He had an uninterrupted run at the Coliseum. And so many other absolutely great players that just were anchors, centerpiece players on NFL teams in the 1980s. That late 1970s crop under John Robinson, it really is one of the great assemblages of talent on a roster in college football history. And you do think about other great assemblages of talent. I think for a lot of people, 2001 Miami, that was a walking NFL combine. 2019 LSU, 2021 Georgia, like those are the heavyweight rosters in terms of just absolutely stuffing the NFL draft and NFL rosters.
Joey Browner, Chip Banks,
our friend Tim, he's just putting them in the comments,
Bo
baby.
Matthews. Yep. Oh, my goodness. And one of the other great 49er defensive backs, I think, went to USC along with Lott. Dwight Hicks, maybe? Anyway, we don't have to dissect the entire deal, but this leads us into a President's Day theme. And before we get started on this path, we want to let everyone know that Matt and the staff there at Trojans Wire put together a USC recruiting Mount Rushmore, the greatest recruits in the history of USC football. So we'll grab the link and leave that in the live chat. You can head on over to Trojans Wire and check that out. And again, not necessarily the best players, the best recruits. We will turn the page to the collegiate production. And Matt, lean on you for what you would consider to be an impossible task, I think, in selecting just 4 players to comprise the Mount Rushmore for USC.
Yeah. So, I think that in terms of the how you go about this, I mean, you have to take someone from the 1972 team because that's the greatest USC team of all time. I mean, and of course, that's not to minimize 2004 or other great USC teams, but I think 1972, like that, just in terms of how dominant a USC team was from beginning to end, 72, I think remains the gold standard. You can put 2004 there in the conversation. I think if 2004 had dump trucked Aaron Rodgers and Cal by 3-4 touchdowns, that might be a different story. It might be a different verdict, but 72, you have to have someone from there. So like you could have Anthony Davis from there. You could have Sam Cunningham from there. You have to have someone from the 2004 team. And you have to have, making sure that you have at least someone from the different eras. So, Ronnie Lott, from the late 1970s. I mean, Anthony Munoz was injured for a little bit. So like his credentials are considerable, but the fact that he was injured for a good portion of that 1979 season, you'd probably put Lott over Munoz if you're comparing the two. But it's not as though there's a clearly wrong answer, with these greats. And of course, you have to have a running back. And I think Charles White. It's not just because he died. It's not just recency bias. Like if you go back through our shows here at the Voice of College Football, White, like we litigated, who is the best USC running back of all time, not in terms of the pro career that followed, but in terms of what he did at USC. I mean, Charles White, in terms of touches, in terms of yards, in terms of just taking a pounding and being the toughest pound for pound college football running back who ever lived. Like, that's not hyperbole. Like, Charles White really was that guy. And so, in my mind, he is the best running back ever at a school which produced Marcus Allen and O.J. Simpson and Mike Garrett. So I think Charles White probably has to be there. So Ronnie Lott, Charles White. Now let's see. From the 2004 Pete Carroll team, I mean, Reggie Bush was electric, but that is a little bit running back centric there. So you do have some tough choices, but representation from the 1970s and the Pete Carroll era. I mean, those would probably form the central components of a USC Mount Rushmore.
If we do take the pro career, which I don't advise, I think it's a, but obviously this is just, fun. Anybody can do whatever they want with this, but I tend to rate and rank these college players based solely on what they did as collegiate players, because certainly some of them went on to ridiculous NFL careers. Others became busts, but I don't think that should downgrade their evaluation as collegiate players in any such way. But if we do take it onto the NFL level, USC produced NFL players. Is it? I don't want to say it's clear, because there are just so many great players. But to me, it's somewhat clear to go OJ, Marcus Allen, Anthony Munoz, Ronnie Lott.
Can you really argue with those four? I mean, you could say Troy Polamalu, possibly, maybe, but like, really, you can't argue with those four. You can't. Not like it's just there. You can't get better than that. You can't.
We appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. We do this every Monday night, so folks, bring some friends with you. We have a good time talking USC football, and we just have a good time finding whatever to talk about during this dead period, but it's not going to be dead for too long. We got spring practice starting very soon, and of course, we will break down the Trojans position by position, and there will start to be some rumblings in recruiting toward the 2024 class as well. And again, the exercise that we just went through, Tim has posted the link in the chat to join Matt and the staff at Trojans Wire that comprised the recruiting Mount Rushmore. I'm going to check that out, because sure, something could be learned by me there for sure. All right, we've got a lot of Mount Rushmore selections.
Now, that article, just worth noting, that's one of those page articles where you have to click like the next page. And I apologize for that. This was from December of 2020, when, it was the dark ages. So, at that time, that's the way the formatting went. So, you're just going to have to click through several pages. But, I'm definitely a worthwhile read on this President's Day for a Mount Rushmore.
There was a
history lesson.
Absolutely. Tim, Matt, there were a couple. I see Tim is just littering the chat there, which is great. We appreciate Tim leading the way here. Matt, there's a couple of references there in the chat about NIL. and not to pin
Yeah.
you down about any specifics, but do you have a good feel for where USC stands and what type of initiatives they made? Because we hear out of various areas of the country in different schools, whether they're ahead. Those are some of the obvious schools that we've seen talked about, but then some other big names have gotten on board in different ways or holding back or trying to navigate it,
Yeah.
just in regards to what USC's been able to put together.
Yeah, I saw Gixxer Squid. If I have any inside scoop, I don't. And I think there are a couple things worth thinking about in terms of NIL, in terms of where USC stands. First is that the Big Ten is going to change this conversation. It's going to change this dynamic. And the 2023 season, it's such an in between season because USC is going to be competing in the Pac-12, but it's recruiting. It's transfer portal activity. I mean, not in May, but in December, that transfer portal season is going to be for competing in the Big Ten. So it's really a very in between existence right now. And what adds to that in between existence, Gixxer Squid and others wondering about NIL at USC, is that we're all waiting to find out if Alex Grinch is the real deal or if this is the season that gets him canned, kicked to the curb. It certainly is a moment of truth year for Grinch. And to that extent, also for Riley, but like it's Grinch on the firing line this season. And so something's going to happen. Either Alex Grinch hits it out of the park or, he doesn't make the grade. And how that dynamic shakes out. And, let's just say for the sake of argument that Grinch doesn't make the cut. Who Lincoln Riley brings in as defensive coordinator, like that's going to have a really big influence on defensive stars, top defensive prospects coming into the program. And so you can have all the NIL money you want, but if you think that you're playing for a weak defense and a not very good defensive coach, like that's going to be an impediment regardless of the dollars. Like you're not going to try and get all the money you can for playing for Alex Grinch if you can get all the money you can at another program, another elite program, playing for an elite defensive coordinator, a guy that is going to equip you for the NFL. So I don't know all the ins and outs, and I know that USC's made some other, well, not USC, but like there have been efforts by collectives, efforts by boosters and donors close to USC. There have been some other efforts that haven't fully taken off yet. So we'll see if this one catches fire. But part of the catching fire is USC really taking off, taking the next step. And that's what we're going to see in 2023.
Looking at my backdrop and noticing this Wisconsin helmet in the range of the USC helmet territory reminds me that Jim Leonhard is on the market. I know just as of a few hours ago, he was interviewing with the Philadelphia Eagles. It appears as though the Green Bay Packers have passed him by. But you would think that based on, not that USC is not an upgrade from Wisconsin, but having been at Wisconsin for as long as he was, that, there was a disappointment. I'm sure that he was not elevated to the head coaching position after the interim audition, and that really the only way up for him would be a head coaching position at the collegiate level or to get an NFL defensive coordinator role. But I guess it wouldn't hurt if USC gave it a shot.
I've written about it. I've mentioned
have
it,
you?
months ago. I wrote about it in December. Like, if ever there was a time to make a run at somebody, and I made the specific point that, firing Alex Grinch is not a plan. All right. Just saying fire Grinch as though getting rid of him solves your problem. No, that's not a plan. You have to have everything lined up for a replacement, and not just any old replacement, but an elite replacement. And Jim Leonhard would be an elite replacement. The person with whom I did the Riley Files, that 12-part podcast series last summer, he tweeted, late in the college football season, when Jim Leonhard was not retained by Wisconsin and Luke Fickell got the job, and then it became clear that Leonard was not going to be on Fickell's staff as defensive coordinator, our Riley Files correspondent said, "Oh no, please, Jim Leonard, don't go to Los Angeles. Please, no." So, like, that right there, just one small glimpse of, what a Jim Leonard Lincoln Riley marriage could look like. Like, I'm thinking, like, that's national title material right there. That is the on ramp to having, like a Lincoln Riley offense and like an Iowa, Wisconsin, for elite defense. You get the best of both worlds. Like, that is what USC should be pursuing. But Lincoln Riley is definitely intent on running it back with Alex Grinch one more year. And one would think that, if it doesn't work out this year, that should give Lincoln Riley more than enough reason to cut the cord and start fresh and really go bigger at defensive coordinator.
The defense was deplorable 2 years ago in 2021. There were significant upgrades, not to anything that we should have expected in elite defense or even a really good defense, but there were enough pieces in certain areas, Eric Gentry and others, that you would have thought that it would have been a top 60, 70 defense, something in that range. Number 124 in yards per play. I don't remember the other standard metrics, but the yards per play sticks in my head at number 124. Sure, Jim Leonard would not be working with an elite defense like he would be facing in practice on the offensive side, but you would think a guy that is as accomplished as he is would be able to mix and match and figure things out to make it a capable defense.
Yeah, you would think, because, if you're an elite coach, especially if you have the tactical acumen that Lincoln Riley does, like, your job is understanding how defenses work so that you can crack the code, and figure out how to break them down. So, like, that should give you an understanding of what a good defense looks like. And that is kind of the puzzling part about Lincoln Riley, is it not? That he makes a living, dissecting defenses, and that involves an appreciation of what makes defenses good, what makes defenses fail, and yet he's retaining Alex Grinch. Now, and again, like, we've gone through this argument or this conversation so many times that, like, Grinch didn't have the dudes, didn't have the personnel, didn't have the depth. We get it, but and this is the thing that I return to, and a lot of USC fans have returned to. Don't you want the best? Don't you want the very best? Don't you want excellence rather than just being okay or decent? Let's just give up 30 points a game, which would have been great against Tulane in the Cotton Bowl. It would have been great in a few of other games from the past season. But, like, that shouldn't be your standard at USC. You shouldn't be settling. You should be going for the very top, creme de la creme. Why settle? And I mean, I don't think Alex Grinch is bad, but that's the wrong focus. Is Alex Grinch elite? And of course he's not elite. So why don't you go for elite? That is the mystery for myself and for a lot of USC fans in terms of Lincoln Riley's, in many minds, misplaced sense of loyalty. That he should be loyalty to USC, which is giving him this great opportunity. He's paid to win national championships. He's paid to be at the very top of the sport. And, he did overachieve in year one, but just why don't you get the very best guys surrounding you? Like, why wouldn't you ever do that? Dabo Swinney, he got Brent Venables and he rose to the top. Like, so Brent Venables, an elite defensive coordinator. We don't know about him as a head coach, separate conversation. But in terms of defensive coordinator, like, that's as good as it gets. And why wouldn't you get someone who's at the very top of his profession? So that's just the ongoing and very familiar Alex Grinch storyline that we're going to be hearing about throughout the offseason and on into late August and early September when the season begins.
If there's anybody in the sport outside of Nick Saban who could be resting on his laurels, it would be Dabo Swinney. And especially leading into this offseason, he was a pretty risk-averse, I don't rock the boat, change out. Guys have had to leave as coordinators, Brent Venables, Tony Elliott, to get head coaching positions. Otherwise, he's just stayed pat with his staff. And they still won the ACC championship. They still, I know that it's been a downgrade, but but still, they're some coaches would have stayed in that same position and just said, we're good, we'll be fine. But no, he recognized an issue and went out and got the best on the market. Not
Yeah,
even on the market. He took him
Garrett
from another
Riley.
team.
Yes, that's right. Yes, and that's the other thing, right? That like who says you have to get a free agent? You can just get someone who's in a position at another school, and you convince them of the offer. I mean, that's what Mike Bohn did, bringing Lincoln Riley aboard. That he's at Oklahoma. Few people thought that he was on the market. A lot of people felt before Lincoln Riley went to USC that the only job Lincoln Riley is going to leave Oklahoma for is the Dallas Cowboys. Like that's the only kind of job with the prestige and the visibility and the career transforming capability. That's the only kind of job you might ever leave the University of Oklahoma for, especially when you're doing well at Oklahoma, as Lincoln Riley was. But Mike Bohn, he was thinking differently. So that exactly reinforces the point that you don't have to make the conventional move. In fact, you shouldn't. Like if you're not thinking really strategically, if you're not thinking deeply about the chessboard and what's attainable, also it's Mike Bohn's move, getting Lincoln Riley, it underscores this point. It never hurts to ask. It never hurts to make a run at a guy that, in the conventional wisdom is viewed to be off limits. You can't hurt yourself by making the attempt, by making the effort. The worst that can happen is the candidate will say no. But if you never make a run at that candidate, you won't know, and you won't get, and you certainly won't get him. And Mike Bohn had the boldness and the vision to be able to pursue that line. So that also underscores the point that you can unearth something in terms of coaching searches. If you are intent and you have a vision and you have a plan and you have the resources, as USC, of course, does, to make something possible. So, yeah, like we shouldn't be limiting ourselves in terms of what's possible and what's attainable at USC.
Mario Cristobal's made 3 hires in the last 10 days, and 2 of them had jobs. And not only had jobs, they had just left schools in which they had jobs last season, were only in their current jobs for 3 or 4 weeks. Hadn't even coached anyone yet. And then were taken by Miami. That just seems to be, I haven't kept track of this, but it seems that, not that it never happened, but years ago that guys would have to be on the open market for most programs to go after them, as opposed to now it seems like anybody's fair game.
Yeah, like I don't know when that changed, but it does seem as though you have a lot more of those kinds of situations.
Yeah.
And I think the point to underscore here is that I think that Lincoln Riley going to USC and Brian Kelly going from Notre Dame to LSU one day later, one season ago in the wildest coaching carousel that I can ever remember. I really do think that the pandemic unlocked something in not just coaches, but just like the pandemic was a moment when people thought to themselves, life is short, time is precious. I shouldn't have to stay somewhere if I don't think I'm fully nourished, I'm fully challenged, or it could also just be, maybe like I had my run at Notre Dame, I had my run at Oklahoma, and let's try something new. Let's live it up. Let's go somewhere very different where I'm going to have to be challenged. I'm going to have to challenge myself in new ways. Like if the pandemic never happens, are we here? Are we having this conversation? Is Lincoln Riley at USC? Is Brian Kelly at LSU? I don't know. I think it had some influence. I don't think it was the primary driver, but I think it had a underlying subterranean role in terms of creating a psychological shift. Maybe not like a change of disposition, but just like an openness. I think that's the key component. It made people more open in terms of considering what life would be like on the other side of a fence, on the other side of a given set of possibilities. I think things have now definitely changed for college football coaches in terms of, I don't have to stay here for a decade. I don't have to stay here. Even if things are good, like I want to taste something different. I want to challenge myself in a different way. I want to feel alive. I think that is a very real part of all this, and it's really fascinating to contemplate. And it's going to be fascinating to see how the coaching industry evolves with this, and how athletic directors are going to pursue future coaching carousel situations, and also in terms of how contracts are drawn up. It's gonna be really fascinating to see.
Pete, thank you so much for the super sticker contribution. Thank you so much for that. And as Tim is reminding everyone in the chat, thank you for being here. Invite a Trojan friend, or many of you are in Facebook groups, or you just have a text chain with 17 USC buddies or whatever, 3 USC buddies. Just let them know that we're here every Monday night talking USC football. We would appreciate that. A couple comments made in the chat concerning the guy that is the #1 rated tight end in the country out of Phoenix, Arizona, who seems to have his attention split, at least in regards to crystal ball predictions between Georgia and USC. And that, of course, Deuce Robinson in the 2023 class. And again, we're talking about a top 20 player in the nation and the #1 player in the state and the #1 tight end. So if we heard any kind of timetables about when he would like to announce,
he mentioned April 1st. And,
okay.
USC hopes to be on the right side of any potential April Fool's jokes there. But yeah, he has mentioned April 1st. Now, maybe he'll move up his timetable, but that was a previously set commitment date for Deuce Robinson. And of course, the added detail there is that he also plays baseball. USC baseball, the leader in terms of all-time national championships with 12, the gold standard there. So there's the added lure of, hey, revive our long dormant, but, historically elite baseball program. Deuce Robinson wants to go to a place where he can play baseball as well as football. So like that is a hook. That is a lure USC has. And of course, USC could gain double the benefit if it can get Deuce Robinson from Arizona.
We talk USC football every Monday with Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire. Get on over to Trojans Wire. Check out Matt's work there. And again, it's 11 p.m. Eastern time. It's 8 p.m. where it counts there on the West Coast, talking USC. God forbid this becomes a wasted season. So maybe I'll take this projection or just this hypothetical situation and I'll cast it upon UCLA instead. that if USC had the season in 2023 that it had, again, God forbid, in 2021, which it won't, it could be very strange. And again, we'll cast this situation upon UCLA because it's more likely, even though I don't think they're going to go to that degree, where you've got this team playing a wasted season in a conference that it's fleeing, whether the one or the other, USC, UCLA has a down year where even by mid to late October, the thought is, wow, we're almost have one foot, on the airplane headed east. Again, just a thought there in terms of, because we've seen various situations in sports, the sports landscape. The Cleveland Browns come to mind when they were leaving town to go to Baltimore, where just had this eerie feeling in Cleveland Stadium for the last couple games because everyone knew they were gone and the game really on the field didn't matter, but it was to be either ridiculed or cherished, depending, or maybe a little bit of both, just these mixed emotions. And even if USC accomplishes as expected this year, there is going to be a sense of this melancholy mixed with celebration type feel toward the end of the year. Again, regardless of what the results are on the field, that this is the standard, the program in the Pac-12 playing its final games against this competition.
It's going to be hard to know what that's going to feel like, but like just with your UCLA scenario, like I can imagine that if UCLA is playing out the string in the Pac-12, and this, not the USC game, like UCLA is going to do whatever it can to win that game. But like, if there's another game in late October, early November, and UCLA's season is already a disaster, like I can see UCLA engaging in some kind of mischief. Like, USC will roll over for a chief competitor of USC, or conversely, like if there's just some other angle that UCLA can help create, that the Bruins will take advantage of that. I think the other game that UCLA is definitely going to get up for this season is Cal, right? Because UCLA is being asked by the UC Board of Regents to subsidize Cal Berkeley athletics. So you'd think that like that's a game that the Bruins are going to be intent on. But we have to get to that fork in the road, get to that intersection to see what opportunities for mischief might exist. But like that is a very fascinating point, and something that I really hadn't contemplated. So the season just got a little more spicy. So thank you for that.
Well, there's also going to be a setting at the LA Coliseum against UCLA, the final game of the season. And again, regardless of the ramifications of the game in the standings, I can't think of another time in history where we're going to have this setting where both teams, and not to lift UCLA to USC's level, but this is kind of the game across the landscape of college football nationally that people all over the country look to the Pac-12, USC, UCLA. That's the rivalry game of rivalry games, and they're both leaving for the Big Ten. That will have an eerie kind of strange feel to it.
Yes, it will. Yeah, that we're having this game out in Southern California, and they're going to go to this conference with all the Midwestern teams. That's going to be bizarre. It's definitely going to be bizarre. And the other thing is that if USC wins the Pac-12, but in 2023, like the Big Ten folks are just going to yawn at that. Like, okay, now try winning in our conference. So even if USC does well at a certain level in 2023, there's going to be a big but, or also a what next? What are you going to do about that? It's like you can already feel the Big Ten's old guard, just kind of, okay, you're just kind of dismissing anything that USC might do in 2023. Welcome to our backyard. Let's see what you're made of, pal.
And USC and UCLA will certainly also, I always find this intriguing that, of course, the Pac-12 will gain a small bit of satisfaction if neither one of these teams can make it to the conference championship game, that they're able to play a conference championship game without these two and be able to say, okay, you weren't good enough to get there, and we were able to move on with Utah and Oregon or whomever in the conference championship game, versus USC and or UCLA being able to kind of snub their nose at, we put our final, championship stamp one more time on the Pac-12 before we took off.
Well, this should be a pretty obvious thing that everyone can agree on. It doesn't mean everyone's going to like it or approve of it, but everybody can agree on. You, Mark, myself, all the people in the comments, all the people watching here at the Voice of College Football, like we should all be able to agree, 100 out of 100 people in a room, that the matchup George Kliavkoff and the Pac-12 want in their conference championship game, Oregon-Washington, right? Like that would be the perfect scenario for Kliavkoff and the Pac-12, because you want those two schools happy. They're the two institutional power centers. Those are the two schools that are always kicked around in more Big Ten expansion negotiations, which, I should point out or reaffirm, Tony Altimore, our friend, college sports consultant, follows the innards of academia and the machinations that go on at the administrative levels, in academia, among college presidents, chancellors, people who are invested in the academic side of these movements and these power plays, not just athletics and what goes on the field. Tony Altimore said it's not going to happen. Oregon and Washington are not going to go to the Big Ten. Pac-12 is going to stay intact, in terms of its current 10-team membership, and then you're probably going to add San Diego State and SMU. But just, if any Oregon, Washington, defection talk or rumors are lingering, an Oregon-Washington Pac-12 championship game would be the ultimate result for George Kliavkoff and Pac-12 brass. That's obviously the game that they want.
Folks, while we're talking about expansion, realignment, all those possibilities and all the talk, I do want to let everyone know that while we haven't completely finalized plans, we've got some exciting things in store for all of you in regards to how we're going to approach all this in regards to programming, live streams here at the Voice of College Football, both here on the USC channel and on the main channel with Matt involved, of course, here on this show and wherever. Pretty much Matt can show up wherever he wants and take over the show. He has full carte blanche here at the Voice of College Football. Of course, we've got Tony, Tim, and Rick and others that lead our USC postgame, and they will continue to do so. But we have certainly vetted out and continue to. We're in the process of vetting out, how to handle this transition and, the content that both Pac-12 and Big Ten fan bases want as it integrates USC and UCLA. And we will do our best to navigate that. And of course, we will have all sorts of good coverage, discussion, debate, analysis here as we move forward. All right.
Oh, well, in terms of like Pac-12, Big Ten issues, let's talk about one of the big stories that broke since our last show last Monday, and that was Ohio State ducking out of the home and home with Washington. Yes. Oh my goodness. So, for one thing, that's going to make the USC Washington game spicier because Washington's going to look at the other side at USC and say, you caused this or you helped cause this and bring it about. So that's going to make USC Washington even more of a collision, maybe with just a little bit more bad blood than there already was. And then the other thing is, and, this is not a complaint about USC leaving. All right. This is just about, college sports and the way it currently works. But Kevin Warren, Jim Delaney presides over a very stable Big Ten. Kevin Warren comes in still pretty new to the party. And, he did not gain a lot of political goodwill in 2020 in the pandemic year with his approach to the season. I mean, Big Ten was just about to shut it down. And he did not make friends at Ohio State. He did not, cover himself in glory with how he handled that particular year. And then just 2 years later, he's pulling USC and UCLA into the conference. And Ohio State now very clearly with this action relative to Washington, Ohio State saying, we do not want to travel across the country any more than absolutely necessary. And I know that, Ohio State getting another home game and the revenue there what was important, but let's not underestimate the travel factor, and that Ohio State doesn't want an overextended, exhausted team. I think that part of the equation was underplayed in terms of the reporting, in terms of what was publicly said. That, if you're trying to win a national championship, you don't want to be zigzagging across the country. So I'm not saying Ohio State was unwise. I am saying that the stated reason of getting the revenue of a home game, that's a little bit overstated because with USC and UCLA coming into the Big Ten and the Big Ten hammering out its media rights deals, Ohio State's getting added revenue. So the idea that Ohio State had to squeeze every ounce of blood from this turnip, maximize revenue, I think that's a little bit overplayed. I think the travel equation is what was underplayed. And I think, if you're Ohio State and you're managing this from a public relations standpoint, yeah, you're not going to be too upfront about saying, oh, we don't want to travel, because that would just create exactly the wrong vibe and the wrong prevailing sentiment in terms of USC and UCLA coming into the conference. Something that's, supposed to be really exciting, is supposed to, improve the brand of Big Ten football and Big Ten athletics in general. So yeah, if you're Ohio State, you don't want to emphasize that, but I think behind closed doors, the travel really was just as important as the revenue piece, if not more. And well, that's just going to create a lot of hurt feelings at Washington and really throughout the Pac-12, because for other schools are going to take note of what Ohio State did, and that might have a chilling effect in terms of scheduling Big Ten, Pac-12 home and homes among the long-term members of each conference. Not talking about USC and UCLA. Those are the two teams in transition. But, for Washington, Ohio State, for, let's say, Michigan State, Oregon, which did a home and home in the past decade or so, it might have a chilling effect on those kinds of arrangements, and that's not going to make anybody happy.
I dropped a link in the chat to my video that I posted this week once Ohio State canceled that series with the Washington Huskies, and their athletic director, I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but
Ben Cohen.
Yes. She emphatically, and when I say emphatically, I was reading off a statement, but it was we are very disappointed. People have circled this on their calendar since 2017. Usually there's not that much level of, I don't know if it's respect or attention given to an opponent in that situation, but she was very forthright about the disappointment of canceling that game, and these two games were circled on the calendar and all of that. So yeah.
And the other reason why the revenue part of this, Ohio State saying, we needed that extra home game, why that's overplayed, is that Ohio State's paying a penalty fee for ducking out of this contract. So that should be another indicator that while Ohio State is publicly saying we wanted the revenue from a home game, well, you're paying all these penalty fees. So it's the travel. It really was the travel. That was the key.
We always enjoyed the conversation with Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire, USC Live, right here at the Voice of College Football. And a lot of you locked in on USC, but enjoy college football talk overall. Just keep in mind that this is just one of 11 shows that we do during the week that are dedicated to a particular team and fan base. So on Tuesday, we've got Iowa and we've got Nebraska at 5:30 and 7 Eastern on those respective channels. All right. Matt, is there anything else you'd like to uncover? We certainly want to let people know that last chance possibly for comments and questions here for tonight.
I think the other really big story from a USC standpoint, which, is not an actual in-house piece of USC news, but it affects a USC opponent, Marcus Freeman settling on an in-house promotion at offensive coordinator instead of getting Dan Mullen, instead of getting another big name. Obviously, he whiffed on Utah's Andy Ludwig. Trojan fans have to be breathing a very big sigh of relief that Marcus Freeman couldn't land a really big fish to coach Sam Hartman this season. So, that's another major development in terms of USC's 2023 season. So, Jared Parker against Alex Grinch. That's going to be the junior varsity chess match in USC Notre Dame, while you have Lincoln Riley against Marcus Freeman. That's going to be the Ollie Frazier, and then you have Parker versus Grinch. But of course, it's been a long-standing view of mine when in terms of viewing really big college football games since I began writing for College Football News in 2001 with Pete Viutek and Rich Sermonello. It's been a long-standing belief of mine that when you have a sexy offense-defense matchup, and then you have the junior varsity matchup in terms of the other sides of the ball, it's usually that smaller matchup that winds up winning the game. That the elites are so good, they're going to win their share of battles. It's what happens in the cross matchup, the one that gets a lot less publicity, or at least has the much less credentialed figures that's going to decide it. And so that's kind of an early read on the USC Notre Dame game now that the Irish have announced their offensive coordinator.
I know Notre Dame media and fans certainly did not enjoy the last few weeks in watching Notre Dame. And I'm not talking about Marcus Freeman. I'm talking about the administration pass on candidate after candidate after candidate. And if I'm seeing the numbers correctly, a $2.8 million buyout of Andy Ludwig's contract. And I don't know what they were willing to fork over. They should have known that there was going to be some level of buyout required, especially taking him from another high level program. But that this is not sending It was maybe less about losing out on the offensive coordinator, although there are concerns about Jared Parker making this type of elevation versus what they could have had, but also about the optics of, are we playing with USC, Georgia, Ohio State? Are we playing on that level, or are we resigned to winning 9 games a year?
Yeah, and I think the added component of this, and it's really intriguing to reflect on this question. We can all reflect on it ourselves, but does the fact that Notre Dame did get such a good transfer portal quarterback, Sam Hartman, which is such a big upgrade from Drew Pine, from Tyler Buckner, the fact that Notre Dame got such an upgrade at quarterback, did that influence the Irish's decision? Like, hey, we can have a budgetary, we can exercise budgetary restraint in terms of our new coordinator and yet still get an elite product. If Sam Hartman had not come to South Bend, how different would that offensive coordinator search have been? And we don't know, but that's just something to reflect on in terms of anyone who's kind of weighing the calculus that Notre Dame faced when it approached that decision.
Matt, I didn't get a chance today to really dissect these rule change proposals that came down. Did you get a look at those?
Well, I mean, I didn't read them in depth, but just I'm definitely aware of them. Please, let's not have the clock run after incompletions. Just at least not have that. Like, that would be like the runner on second base in the 10th inning in baseball.
Absolutely.
Because, like, that's not football. If the clock runs after incompletions, that's not football, because the whole point of stopping the clock on an incompletion means it introduces a significant component of risk to a forward pass late in a game when you are trying to either run out the clock, get a first down, and you're trying to deal with that fundamental tension. Do we play it safe? Do we run the ball to burn timeouts, to burn the clock, or do we pass the ball to get a first down? That is a fundamental element of modern football. And 1890s, okay, that's not modern football. Like, ever since the forward pass was created, in the early 20th century, we've had this fundamental chess match tactical tension in terms of, do you throw or do you run late in the game? Do you value the clock and timeouts, or do you value getting the first down or scoring points, to put the game out of reach on the scoreboard? Forget about the clock. If the clock runs after incompletions, that's not football. And God, that would just be atrocious. The other basic points to make, I'm okay with the clock running after a first down, because that's in pro football, and that just seems like a time element where that seems pretty natural. Like, the clock runs if you catch a ball or you inbounds, or if you run the ball. So getting a first down, like, that's kind of more conditional and
Yeah,
not
you're
like
basically
inherent.
saying, what's the difference between advancing the ball on any particular play just because it's a first down conversion?
Yeah, because like, and again, you don't have that in the NFL. So, like, that's just kind of a natural thing, and college football has chosen to stop the clock on first downs. But incompletions, clock running after incompletions, like, that would be different. That would be a big structural change to how football is played. And I really hope the sport doesn't go there. But a couple of things worth knowing. One is they're trying to do everything but fewer commercials, right? They have to get the advertising dollars with the investments that Fox is making in the Big Ten, and which ESPN, Disney are making in the SEC. So we want to reduce the length of games, but not through fewer commercials. That's point one. The other point, though, what did we talk about last week here at the Voice of College Football? We talked about making officiating simpler. We talked about making review processes simpler. And we talked about writing the rule book in a simpler, more concise way, such that the referees don't have this, highly legalistic thicket of rule nuances to sort through, which is what makes rule review or play reviews, 5, 8, 10 minutes long. That's what extends games far beyond what they should be. And if we wrote the rule book simply, such that you can make reviews applying simple, linguistically clear principles, written for a 5-year-old, and you can have reviews finished in 10 to 15 seconds after you get all the sufficient camera angles. You can just look at 3 camera angles, and in 15 seconds, you can make a review. If we did that, that would accomplish so much more than these things that college football is considering. But again, incomplete clock running after incompletions, that's like putting a runner on second base in the 10th inning. I really hope we don't go there. I really hope we don't go there.
Well, I don't, and maybe I'm overstating this or overthinking it, but I don't like the time variable or the wild card variable in terms of time of a pass being incomplete. And at what point do you exchange the ball and get the team set to go for the next play? It seems to put a lot of pressure on the referees, on the officials, and to get the next play set. There it's 13, 12, 11,
Yeah. That brings up a great point that, if you want to drain clock late in the game, just throw a 70-yard pass. They're going to have, and it's incomplete. Well, the clock's going to restart, and it's going to take them longer to get the ball in play, to do the mechanics of that.
Yeah,
so there you go. You open Pandora's box into all sorts of BS just like that. Thank you.
I'm thinking of an Arizona State-Wisconsin game from about 5 or 6 years ago, in which there was a fire drill at the end of the game.
Yes.
The officials botched the situation.
Yes.
I just see that more of that resulting.
Yes, absolutely. And that was the first game I remembered. I'm not saying it's the first game in which it actually happened, but that was the first game I consciously remember the official standing over the snap, and saying, you can't snap it. We have to do this procedure first, all while the clock was running in the final 10 seconds. Like that itself was an opening of Pandora's box. And, it in Wisconsin was legitimately wronged in that game. And so, do we want more of that? And it just goes back to what we talked about last week for any of you who watched our show last week. And so this is USC Trojans Live 42. So just Google USC Trojans Live 41, YouTube, Mark Rogers, USC, Voice of College Football. Listen to that show we did last week if you didn't catch it, because we talked so much about officiating and replay reviewing. We have looked at it, the powers that be in football, NFL, but also college football, people who write the rule book and who are in charge of implementing officiating procedures, they have viewed these things from a standpoint of, okay, are we covering every specific contingency? Do we have sufficient complexity and nuance to cover everything? And that focus on complexity, while understandable, like you do want to cover all the contingencies, it has created a rule book which is so large and so unmanageable and so unintelligible in terms of like, what does this text actually mean in terms of when you see a play and apply it? If we viewed the rule book and officiating procedures and replay policies from a standpoint of simplicity, like let's write the rule as simply as possible so that an official can just take 10 seconds after getting all the requisite camera angles. Like we should be looking at this from a standpoint of simplicity, not complexity. And if we did that, and you get 10-second reviews for every play, or at least, no more than like 20 seconds for any review, once you get all the requisite camera angles, if we did that, so much of this conversation goes away, and we don't have to think about having a running clock after incompletions, which is not football.
And to your earlier point, let's say, and I don't know that this is the case, but let's say we can all agree that the games are too long. Let's say we all agree on that. The 3.5 hour game is too long. Well, what is worse, that 3.5 hours is filled with entertainment, or is that 3.5 hours filled with officials, under a hood looking at it and waiting for the call and all those sorts of situations?
Amen. Can't put it any better than that. That's the last word on that subject.
I also did hear that there would no longer be the ability of a coach to call multiple timeouts to ice the kicker.
Like that. That's really good. Like that should be a no-brainer, and that seems pretty simple and common sense.
Here's my thought, though, Matt. While I don't enjoy sitting there, okay, game-winning field, okay, timeout, Oh, game-winning field, okay, and he called a second time. while I don't enjoy that, just like I don't think that the average baseball fan enjoys 53 tosses to first base to hold the runner back, it seems as though, again, we have talked about contrived situations. And this is analogous to that, that if you are going to outlaw the ability of the coach to call multiple timeouts without a play being run, then you should be consistent throughout the entire game and outlaw that from the start of the game to the end of the game. That you cannot call multiple timeouts without a play being run. Then I would be okay with it.
I think that's a happy resolution of that. And I think that the principle is sound. And, for people who would say, you know what, a coach should be able to call 2 or 3 straight timeouts if he wants to, because he saved those timeouts for end game situations. Like those are the poker chips that he has in reserve. So he gets to play them how he wants to. Fine. Like, this is not a hill I'm going to die on. Like, I do think that, I don't like coaches just calling consecutive timeouts just to kind of draw out the process of icing a kicker. But like that, if that was left in place, like, I'm not going to be devastated. All right. Because like that is just a small and very situationally specific thing. It doesn't have reach throughout the whole of a football game the way a running clock after incompletions would. Like that would affect all of a game. It would affect a myriad of situations. I mean, obviously it would be felt more acutely at the end of a game, but like even in the fourth, like with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, like if that was in place, that would significantly affect, the larger calculus of decisions that build up throughout a game. Because if there's a running clock after incompletions, well, that naturally makes it far more difficult for trailing teams to mount comebacks. And I don't think we can even wrap our minds around just how dramatically this would affect college football. And, when we've seen great comebacks or great collapses in the sport, a 28-point fourth quarter comeback, something like that, which, is, as you said, it's great entertainment. Like, do we want to get in the way of that? We want to make it hard for teams to carry leads all the way through. We don't want to make this easier for teams to, cruise through a second half after they get a big early lead, because then this just becomes a battle of, who gets the lead midway through the third quarter. I mean, talking about a 3-possession lead. You're going to see far fewer comebacks. It's not going to be really a 60-minute game. It's going to be a 40-minute game. To use a baseball analogy, if you're going up against a team with an absolute lockdown bullpen, if you have the lead after 6 innings, well, it's game over, good night, drive home safely. But it's a 9-inning game. Like we should want, competitiveness throughout the entirety of regulation time. So that gets in the way of that. It would just be a disaster. And just talking about it, thinking about it, surely college football is not going to be this dumb. Surely college football is not going to step on a rake like this. And yet, we know that if something is really stupid, that, a pro sport like what we see with baseball under Rob Manfred with the runner on second in the 10th inning, like you just take something that's good the way it is and you try and mess with it. Oh God, I'm just this is really annoying.
Yeah, in that particular situation, as I believe, agree upon, that just that brings a elite level sport with the best players in the world talking about the runner at second base. That brings that down to Sunday afternoon, beer league softball.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we have a runner at second base who just happened to show up there. He didn't earn that second base standing. Yeah, absolutely. I could talk officiating and the rule book with Matt for quite a long time, because this has come up a few times, and we certainly agree on the integrity of the foundation rules of the sport in terms of the configuration of the field and possessions and possessing the ball and where the ball should be marked and all that. And when then there are just these rules that are made up to inadvertently place the ball somewhere where it doesn't belong, is just insane.
Yeah.
All right. Really good stuff. Appreciate Matt being here. Without Matt, we don't have a show, but we hope to have Matt next week again. So we will have a show next week, next Monday at 8 Pacific time. So bring your friends here to talk USC football, and it will start to ramp up as we get into spring practice. We'll break down the positions and recruiting as well. You see there on the banner our next show here at the Voice of College Football, Hawkeyes Live, Tuesday at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central over on our Iowa show. Matt, what do you have in store for everyone?
Well, just to be honest, this is the Voice of College Football, but like we're just, talking bubbles and brackets with USC basketball. That's really what we're doing on our site. We're going to be linking to a lot of your videos, Mark, over the course of the week. But, like this is basketball. The season's going to be over in a month. So we're going to ride the basketball train. And, once we get into spring ball, obviously we're going to dive very deep into the position battles and what the roster and the depth chart are going to look like. So, there, as I've said to you before, and as I said on previous shows, that, there are times when I really sell our website and what we're doing and like, you got to go here. Well, this is kind of a quiet time. So I don't want you to think, folks watching here at the Voice of College Football, like, oh, you got to be at Trojans Wire every waking moment. No, actually, I want you to live a normal life. Believe it or not, I want you to do other things with your families, with your friends. So like this is a time to do that. All right. Like I value holistic work-life balance here at Trojans Wire and at the Voice of College Football.
I certainly duplicate that message. At the same time, there is not a time during the year that I'm not trumpeting. Get to our channels.
That's
and check out.
Well, but you're running an empire, the Voice of College Football with all these programs, all these schools. So like if one program's quiet, another program might have something going on.
Hopefully.
So you have that multiple fires burning dynamic going for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you so much for being here. We'll check it back. We will be here next Monday with all of you here at the Voice of College Football. Fight on.